Welcome back, grade 12 scholars. It's Ms. Novak here, and we are still in week 4, but we are now ready to engage in lesson 18 of your ELA online learning. Let's get started. Here's our weekly snapshot. So yesterday, I know that we looked at craft and structure. We analyzed the author's point of view, as well as uncovered the fact that this essay is an informal essay in nature. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the author's use of style. More specifically, we'll analyze her incorporation of her own personal experiences in this essay. You'll need this video, ELA, grade 12, week 4, lesson 18. We'll still be utilizing the same text in our packets, Back to My Own Country and essay. And today's task will be to analyze the author's style and answer some questions on our no-catchers. Let's get started. You know that we start and end with reminders. So let's make sure that we plan to share our learning with someone today. Let's also engage in our fluency practice. And as always, let's make some time for our independent reading selection. Now we're ready to get started with lesson 18. Okay, so it's time for a riddle of the day, but instead of a riddle of the day, we're going to do a word puzzle of the day. Today's riddle is actually a pictogram puzzle. So these are sometimes called word puzzles or rebus puzzles. What you'll do is you'll look at the image on the screen and think about a word or phrase that it conjures up. I'll give you about 15 seconds at this point. Please pause the video if you need to figure this mystery out. Did you get it? Think outside the box? Okay. Feel good about this one. I think, right? We've all seen this one before. Anyways, let's launch into our learning. Your lesson materials can all be found in your learning packet. Lesson 18 is on page 59 of this. Your note catcher is also on page 60, and you'll need something to write with. Actually, as we're getting into these next lessons, you might want to get a couple of different colors of markers. If you have a highlighter, I know I need to scrounge around for one that wasn't all dried up, but in any case, make sure that you have your materials on the ready before you engage in learning. We will continue to utilize Back to My Own Country and essay, this powerful text, located on pages 32 to 40 of your packet. Let's get that out now. Here's our learning target for today. Lesson 18, let's read this together. I can analyze the effectiveness of an author's inclusion of personal experiences in an essay. So today we're going to continue the study of craft and structure. Now keep in mind when we do this, we are analyzing an author's choices behind the words that they use and what they choose to write about, especially its effect on the reader. So let's keep this in mind as we launch into our learning. Here's a lesson overview. So first of all, today we're going to be rereading Back to My Country and essay. We're going to be marking parts in the text in which the author includes her personal experiences with historical information. Next, we're going to ask you to think of the author's style of writing. We know from our last lesson that this is an informal essay, but what emotional responses do the author's words evoke in us or in other readers? We're going to ask you to think about how you feel about the author after having read and reviewed these personal experiences. Next, we're going to ask you to pick out 3 different paragraphs in the text and to talk to a family member, caregiver, or friend about how these have affected your opinion of the author and your overall reception of the essay. And in the space provided in your note catcher, you're going to apply your thinking and answer the following questions. Was the author's use of personal experiences in the essay effective in getting her point across? Why or why not? Feel free to utilize examples from the essay in your response. We know that each day we uncover different shades of meaning as we review this essay, but let's review our purpose. To examine a first-hand account of how British colonialism complicated the idea of home. We're focusing on the essential question now, more than ever. What does it mean to call a place home? And of course, our guiding question, how did British colonialism complicate the idea of home? We're about to uncover how the author's use of personal experiences helps reinforce the importance of this question. Let's get started. For our reading task, again, reread Back to My Country an essay. Mark the parts in the text in which the author intersperses her personal experiences along with historical information. It's especially helpful for you to read through your annotations. Here's where two colors come in handy. Make sure you use two colors to underline, one for the author's personal experience and one for the use of historical information. It doesn't have to be a highlighter, but it can be a blue pen, a black pen, whatever you have on deck. Let's engage in this task right now. Pause the video to complete this. Welcome back. It's now time for the thinking component of today's lesson. We're going to think about the author's style of writing. We know that from our last lesson that this is an informal essay, but what emotional responses do the words the author uses evoke in us? For example, after reading parts of the text and learning about the author's personal experiences and that of her family's, do you feel sympathy, respect, or concern for the author? Or do you feel something else? We'll make sure that we underline the words and phrases that evoke that emotional response from us or bring that out, and then we'll discuss that together. I'll share with you an example before we get started. Let's take some time to engage in this activity. Let me bring you through an example of my own. So I'm focusing on paragraph 34 of the text. I underlined her personal experiences in blue. I also underlined a historical fact or a reference in green. Let me read to you what I have underlined in blue. Of Britain, just as much as the white kids I grew up with in Highbury. The way she references white kids who she grew up with shows that she views herself as an outsider, right? Like even though she was living right alongside of them. And that society might view her as an outsider as well. The second item, people like my dad and his fellow passengers on the Windrush would end up here. They belonged, whether Britain realized this or not. This is really important because she's not only speaking from a personal experience of her own, but she's talking about that of her family, right? She has a really hard time growing up in a place, Britain, that chooses not really to acknowledge its history with the Caribbean, especially given the fact that the labor and the goods and services and everything that came out of that nation essentially helped build Britain into the empire it is today. Again, a conflicting interest there. I noted here that the green and empire being a cultural hub, we know that's what we consider Britain now, but that there's been a lot lost in its failure to acknowledge the contributions of Caribbean immigrants and the Caribbean in general. This makes me sympathize with the author in that it can't be easy living in a land that doesn't acknowledge you fully. I'll let you take some time to develop thinking of your own and to lift up a paragraph that you're interested in. Take some time to do that now. Next, let's talk about how you'll discuss these points. So you'll be choosing 3 different paragraphs in the text, and you will talk with someone about how you feel about the author after having read each one. What words or phrases does the author use to evoke those feelings in you? Again, I know we've read the text a few times now, but each and every time you can pick up something new. So let's explore this in discussion before we launch into our writing efforts. Your daily writing practice. So there's space reserved, as always, in your note catcher for you to capture your thinking. We will ask you here, was the author's use of personal experiences in the essay effective in getting her point across? Why or why not? Think about it. The details that she chose to include, the paragraphs that you lifted, was her incorporation of her personal experience, did that really help solidify her points? Use the notes that you made in the margin of the text and the conversation that you just had with someone to inform your writing. Take some time to accomplish this task now. I don't know about you, but I really felt this was a very intense lesson. It was very personal in nature, partially because we were studying the author's use of personal experiences, but also because we were really tapping into our emotional side and our emotional investment in the essay. Tomorrow's learning, we're going to switch a little bit to our study of British colonialism and how it complicated the idea of home. So let's get ourselves ready for that learning tonight before our reading endeavors. Thank you for learning with me today. Here's a couple of quick reminders before we wrap up today's lesson. I know this was a very highly charged lesson. There were a lot of emotions that were brought out. Make sure that you extend those reactions into conversations. It really is an important subject matter. Next, make sure you are reading independently for 20 minutes a day. I hope your read is as interesting as mine. If not, feel free to switch. Next, your fluency practice. If you need a quick review of the directions, that can also be found in your packet. We'll see you tomorrow for our last lesson of the week.